This is Dina Moskowitz, CEO of Partner Optimizer, and I'm here doing another episode from InPartnerCon Live 2024 of Ecosystem Chronicles, and that is our typical webcast where we focus on partner intelligence for the channel and partner ecosystems. And it's really exciting to be here at InPartnerCon because I'm surrounded by all the partnerati, as I like to call them. And one of those people that have been able to bring over and get scheduled is one of the best in the marketing technology partner tech stack world. And his name is Blake Williams. And Blake is actually, besides being a fellow member of Partnership Leaders with me, he is also a CEO and founder of multiple companies, including one that is new to market right now called Growth Story. And it's an AI generating application that is allowing a better together strategy with your partners, but I'll let Blake talk about it. But first and foremost, we're here to talk about partner data and partner intelligence, which is why our companies have such a good synergy together. And when it comes to partner intelligence, our topic is marketing development funds right now, MDFs as they're called. And what goes on with MDFs is that channel partnership leaders and programs will set aside capital specifically for partners to use to do the marketing with them, to co-sell, co-market. And yet a lot of those MDF funds go unused, underutilized, or poorly utilized. And so we brought Blake on specifically to talk about why that's happening and how we can do more with less when it comes to MDF funds. So welcome, Blake. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dina. I appreciate it. And I think it's 50%, right? I think 50% is kind of the going average of how much MDF gets left on the table. And you hear Jay talk about what are the reasons why the utilization becomes so low or is so low. And I think one of those big contributing factors is the yield, right? And how much can you actually generate in terms of from a pipeline perspective from any of that money that you do get from a vendor to contribute to either the content creation or the distribution of those assets to drive demand, right? And I think from my perspective and why I started Growth Story, spent the past 5 years running Amp Factor, and that did exactly what Dina said. We stood up joint value propositions between two businesses or more, and then ended up taking that to market. And MDF was a large piece of how we got to market or how we helped those partners get to market. The biggest thing was that, one, it took a lot of time to create all those assets for an integrated demand gen strategy. So it's kind of daunting to think about all the different assets and content that you have to create from scratch with that initial partner. Two, it's an expensive investment when you don't know how it's going to actually turn out after you do actually get to market, right? And when we think about solving those two problems, the bigger issue around all of that, for the vendor at least, is that if every partner is experiencing that kind of turmoil, what happens across their entire channel, right? The whole, both their strategic and their long tail. And I think that's where your app comes in, right? Is how do we find the best fit partners to invest in from an MDF perspective? And my limited time as a venture capital fund, we always manage things across the entire portfolio so that we can maximize yield. And MDF is kind of that same thing. We're investing in partners to go to market so that we can 3x our money, right? And so when we think about the data and what role that plays into it, if I'm a partner or if I'm a vendor and I have 2,000 partners, kick me off on how Partner Optimizer kind of helps sort through that data problem. If either whether I know it or not, the data problem.
Right. Well, I mean, as we've talked about, not all partners are equal when it comes to what your ideal partner is as a partnership leader or running a partner program. And so you don't want to allocate those MDF funds equally across the board to someone that's inactive or aligned with your competition, as opposed to the ones that really will invest with you and give you their bigger share of wallet. So by being able to figure out which of those partners, whether it's their best partners or long tail, have the best alignment for the specific campaigns you want to do with those MDF funds, we can help to basically surface those right ones in the order of, whether they're excellent and very good or whether they're not a match at all. And once you know the ones that are very good, you want to definitely put more into those and give them the time, the capital, the incentives,
right,
and then invest that together.
right. In your experience, based on, I know you've worked with a number of large vendors. When you go in and you look at the composition of the folks that they are spending some of that MDF money with, what have you seen just high level from, here's my partner base that I think is the right and best fit versus what you were able to find?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, because a lot of times there's like their mouths open, like they didn't realize that partner, as much as they thought they were a great partner, were actually very aligned with the competition.
Mm-hmm.
Or some partners that they thought were not very aligned actually could be highly aligned based upon things like their tech stack and their own ICP aligning to the partner's ICP.
Right.
And so I say this a lot: what you pay attention to determines what you see, but also what you miss. And so when the data is telling you more about these partners than you're able to know from yourself, from a conversation,
Right.
or from what they fill out in a form, or from one meeting where you're only talking about your solution, it's a lot different. So when you can aggregate all of those different business attributes and figure out who those right ones are and who to invest in, it reduces the friction tremendously. But you're investing it much more wisely. Like you said, your yield is going to be higher.
100%. 100%. When I think about, once we right size the types of partners that we do want to invest in, where growth story comes in is that we end up creating that JVP using generative AI, helping everybody. There's two ways you can optimize your portfolio. You can either get better at doing demand gen with partners, or you can drive down the cost. And we chose to focus on the first half and deliver on-brand assets, at a reduced rate, that kind of thing, versus having an agency do it from scratch.
Well, and there's one more thing you're doing, which is you're reducing the labor that it requires of the partners to actually do all that work, which is a huge value add.
That's it. Especially for MSPs and MSSPs, where there's not a ton of marketing, not prowess, but they just don't have a deep bench of marketers to sit there and focus on JVPs while they're doing their own brand.
Exactly.
Right. And it becomes a really big way for those types of teams to start to appear in all the places where the buyers are now, right? Buyer behavior has shifted. Attention is in different areas. It's in communities. It's with influencers. The demand gen strategy needs to shift, and it's hard for them to shift to a state of high trust, leveraging the brand while you're flying the plane. You know
exactly.
what I mean?
And there's so much of it that you would be expected to do. And that's one of probably the top reasons it doesn't get utilized, is that no one has the bandwidth to do it.
Right.
So if you take away all those steps and you create better quality messaging, and you then can replicate it across to the different parts of the ecosystem, you really are helping everyone win.
That's it. That's it. And ultimately, what I think, especially in that realm, is as they're developing these joint solutions, right? A JVP is usually between one or two different companies, but really these MSPs are focused on developing a holistic solution, right? And being able to talk about that whole thing and bring that to market is significantly, I think it's an accelerator, right? It's a force multiplier when you think about all the programs that they're trying to invest in and prioritize. So I think MDF, from a generative AI standpoint, is going to absolutely see a different type of experience. We know it already shifted from accrual based to this proposal based, but even then, it's about to get further optimized, especially if we include the data aspect.
Yeah. And then talk about, our title was doing more with less, right? So you don't need as much MDF to achieve the same outcome or a higher outcome because of this. So you now don't have to have as crazy a budget for the MDF, and you can still achieve more and better.
That's it. That's it. And push it further, and you can develop 3 times the assets, and it only takes you another 15 minutes. Right. So you can start to personalize and speak to the CISO, or speak to the head of marketing, and speak to the head of finance. And it didn't cost you any more. And it only took you an extra 10 minutes to develop all of the same asset bundle that you would have needed to run that demand gen in the first place. It's a big lift.
Yep. It really is. And so it's actually great, because one of my next questions is, with all of these modern tech tools that we're bringing to market, whether it's Partner Optimizer or Growth Story or some of the others out there, how do we, what do you say to those channel chiefs who are needing to reallocate budget or ask for budget or get more budget, even though we're saying you can do more with less? What are your recommendations for them?
Interesting. So one of the things that we just went through and did with a company is that we analyzed their historical spend on MDF and the yield that it created in terms of the pipeline, and then the revenue that was finally generated, how much they asked for. And we looked back and kind of imputed what Growth Story's cost would have been versus an agency or even the internal hours. And I know that's kind of unfair because there's nobody else doing this in this space. But the things are what they are. And we were able to reduce the creative spend by somewhere around 30 to 40%. So I would say you could probably use that as an indicator. If you're going to submit for a budget and you think about adopting AI, generative AI, to create that force multiplier, then take 40% of your creative budget, reduce it, and see what that does to your yield. Without getting too deep in it, you created a certain number of leads for X amount of spend. If you reduce that spend, right, what does that full spend? I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but what's the increase in leads that you're going to get now that you can spend, instead of $5, it only costs you $2 to generate the same amount of leads. Spend the whole $5 and you'll generate 15 leads or whatever the outcome is. But yeah, I would say focus on thinking about what that reduction in spend is going to look like for you.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I encourage everyone to check out Growth Story because it really is a fascinating technology, and we've been using it together and playing around at all the messaging we can create together. And especially when you do know that you're talking to the right partners and the partners have the right and aligned ideal customer profile as you. And that's why they're an ideal partner profile to some degree. And so the messaging you can create is that much more refined because you now know what is mutually important and
100%.
Having all that intelligence with you.
100%. And I think, if we take both the data and the creative aspect, and Jay McBain talking about this, typically people have 7 different partners that they get strategic with. Each of those 7 partners solve somewhere between 80 to 90% of the problems that you don't yourself solve with your solution. So what it does is it allows you to talk about, if each one solves 3 pain points, it gives you 21 new pain points to talk about as it relates to your organization. Historically, it's been limiting to try to create the content that is that robust in that amount of variety or volume. But now with Growth Story, you can talk about all 21 of those JVPs and start to access more of that 5%, given that 95-5 rule of how many are in market. But if you do that with your partners, you start to creep up very, very close to the top of that 5% penetration because your partners are reaching different areas of your TAM that you aren't getting to today. So getting the right partners, figuring out who to be strategic with, and then investing using MDF in a new way where you can spend 70% of your money on distribution instead of the assets that are on brand communicating that JVP.
A lot faster too.
Yes, a lot faster too. Yes.
All right. Well, great. Thank you so much. If anyone has any further questions, let us know through LinkedIn Live and we'll answer you offline. But thank you for being here. And Blake, it was great to have you, and good luck with Growth Story. And I look forward to our partnership as we go forward.
Thanks for having me, Dina.
You're welcome.
All right.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, everyone. I'll be back soon with Rob Spee of Beyond Trust to talk about his experiences in how he is going to market and co-selling with his partners. So I'll talk to you soon.